She said that Eve did not pack a lunch today, and can I bring a lunch over to the school? This happens quite often when you're raising children, because I know that her teacher is uncomfortable with her being hungry and not having a lunch, and it would ease her discomfort if I came to the school with a lunch. But I responded and just said, Eve is responsible for making her lunches in the morning, and she actually told me she did pack a lunch. So the natural outcome is she's just going to need to be hungry. And hopefully nobody gives her food and nobody steps in and gives her a lunch.
The arrest of a popular YouTube mom known for her strict parenting style, now under suspicion of child abuse.
Hey everyone, welcome to Keto and Crime. Normally I would be working on our this week's entry in our Third Reich compilation video series, but today I'm taking a little break from that to address something that kind of broke over the long holiday, actually a few days before, that I find quite disturbing. And normally I would not cover YouTube drama on this channel, but because this has spiraled from drama to an actual crime, I feel the need to cover it. Now, this deals with a former YouTube star, pictured here, 𝗂𝗏_𝗀𝗏. Now, I've heard that name pronounced Frank and Frankie, but I've heard herself say Frankie, so that's what I'm going to refer to. She is the mom in what was one of the biggest family vlogging channels on YouTube. If you're not familiar with family vloggers, think of 𝗙𝗵𝗁, which is a whole other sanctimonious onion to peel into. The Ace family, basically any channel that is just vlogs about their daily life, particularly if it's a married couple with children and children are the stars. Now, I don't much get into this type of channel because I think it's kind of exploitive. I mean, you're basically shoving a camera in your child's face and covering every little thing about their daily life, and to me it's very intrusive. And if you actually look in the history of a lot of these channels, they usually end up stopping uploading. Sometimes the parents split up. It's not a healthy situation for a family to be in. But this is not a theoretical essay or an ethics essay on parenting channels. I'm concentrating on this lady here. She was, like I said, the mom in the family blogging channel known as 8 Passengers, which started in 2015 and amassed 2.3 million subscribers before they stopped uploading, and eventually the channel was taken down in 2022. It consisted of 𝗂𝗏, her husband Kevin, and 6 children, starting with Sherry, who is the oldest and now college age, the second oldest, Chad, and then there were some children in between that I'm not going to bring up because really the center point of the story is on the others, and their youngest, Evie, who at the time the channel was taken down was about 7 years old. So that's who we're dealing with here. Now, this channel actually got into a bit of controversy before what happened over Labor Day weekend happened, in that her parenting style was rather unique. If you saw the clip that I put on just before I started talking, you'll notice that she's talking about refusing to take her 6-year-old daughter, Evie, a lunch after Evie forgot her lunch, and her excuse for that was that Evie will learn a lesson if she goes hungry. Now, while I'm not against the fact that if a child is presented with food and won't eat it just because the child wants something different, that letting them skip a meal might not be a bad way to teach them to eat what they're given. You know, like if my mother presented me with chicken and vegetables and potatoes and I wanted a pizza, you know, I either eat the chicken, vegetables, and potatoes, or I go to bed hungry. That sort of thing. Now, do I think it's okay to withdraw food from a child as normal punishment? Absolutely not. That's monstrous. And so she kind of got into a bit of trouble about that because she refused to take the child some lunch. And the teacher was very upset about it, and she, as you heard her say, she was, felt the child needed to learn a lesson. And it wasn't just these instances, and I'll put a few more clips here that actually shows her using things like food as punishment, basically threatening Chad, the oldest boy, and her other boy for play fighting, and basically saying that if they didn't stop it, they would lose the privilege to eat. Now, I think food and water is a universal right, and I think there should be some way that no one goes hungry, particularly in a developed country. I really do believe that. And so to hear a family that is obviously, these people were upper middle class. I mean, they raked in millions of dollars with their YouTube channel. There's all kinds of advertising and things that they did. So they were raking in with ad revenue and everything. They were, plus Patreon, they were raking in millions of dollars. She herself has said that.
I was making millions, and I left it.
And her husband, up until last year, was an engineering professor at BYU, Brigham Young University in Utah. They resided in Utah. They were a very traditional Mormon family. And as you've heard me say on any of the crimes that have taken place connected to the LDS Church, 𝗬𝗍𝗪, I do not blame the Mormon Church for the acts of a few crazies in their congregation. But being Mormon was a very prominent part of this family, and they really believed that spoil the rod, spare the rod, spoil the child kind of punishment. But when you get to withholding food, and later on as we'll find out, water is taking it a bit much. They also got into a bit of trouble when it came out that they actually sent Chad, who was 15 at the time. He was having some typical teenage boy troubles. They sent him to a wilderness camp known as an 𝗓𝗍𝗄 in Arizona, where basically these teenagers are sent out there with nothing but the clothes on their back and are forced to live in the desert.
So we spent weeks and months inviting this child to change, holding this child accountable. And when that wasn't a decision we could see that this child was going to make, we said, okay, what is a visceral experience that we can offer this child as a gift? And having him go to a wilderness therapy camp was what we came up with.
Now, as someone who was sent to gay conversion camp, I can tell you universally, the only thing these camps do is make you more resentful of your parents and make any mental illness that you may have worse. And even though they sent him there for 8 weeks, when he came home, they said he was better, but then we find out from a video clip, which I will install here, that in addition to that, they also took away his bedroom for 7 months and made him sleep on a beanbag chair in a family room.
Without a bedroom, it was not funny.
Now, I can't even begin to imagine the physical and mental strain of not being able to have a bed to sleep in, especially when you have a bed available to you, would do to a developing teenage boy, not to mention just the physical and mental, injury and toll. I mean, think about that. So let's just say the channel got blasted for a lot of stuff. And then in 2022, Ruby and Kevin suddenly stopped uploading, and all of a sudden we see Ruby teaming up with another person by the name of Jody Hildebrandt. Now, Jody Hildebrandt is this lady here who is a drug and alcohol counselor from Utah that actually lost her, or had a suspended license in 2018 for some shenanigans, and I will take you to a website about that as well. Basically, she had her license put on probation, for 18 months, effective in 2012, and she basically violated patient counselor privilege by telling a entire congregation that one of her patients was addicted to porn, and he basically says that he wasn't addicted to porn, and as a result reported her to the licensing board, and she lost her license for 18 months. Now, for a long time, Jody Hildebrandt was on a suggested counselors list for things like gambling, sexual addiction, pornography, addiction to anything that wasn't spiritual and of the family. She was on a preferred list at local LDS churches to help their members. But she began receiving, not only with the incident of violating patient counselor privilege, she also was reported many, many times for just her outlandish beliefs. Pretty much, she was very cult-like in what she taught, and would often say that even being sexually attracted to your partner, that is your husband or your wife, was a form of what she called distortions, which is basically anything that clouds your vision of God's ultimate plan for you. So this is very an LDS faith-based type of counseling. But basically, she basically broke her clients down or patients down to nothing, and often, segregated them from family. But let's just say that Jody Hildebrandt met up with Ruby Franke, and they started a counseling and mental fitness coach. That's a new name for life coach, I suppose. Service called Connections, spelled with an X, CONNEXTIONS, Connections Classroom, to counsel people, and it became very cult-like. And what we know, after she met Hildebrandt in 2021, by 2022, when 8 Passengers was taken down, we do know that just a few months later, Kevin, her husband, moved out of the family home with oldest son Chad, and kind of disappeared. Neighbors said they didn't see him very much, that occasionally he would be at the house when Ruby would not be, and vice versa. We found out Ruby was spending a lot of time with Jody in her house about an hour away now. So he disappeared. We also know that he either resigned or lost his job at BYU, and has kind of been out of the public eye for a while, as has Ruby. There were reports of neighbors saying that her children, usually Evie, would be seen walking around their neighborhood, knocking on doors, asking if any children were there that wanted to play, and that anytime they would call CPS, and there was also a YouTube subscriber petition to get CPS involved, but CPS never found anything. And then, according to neighbors, Ruby then basically boarded up the house, put paper over the windows so that nobody could see in, and the children were not seen very much. So we can only imagine the shenanigans going on. And if you take a look at this video here of Jody and Ruby practicing mental fitness counseling, you'll see that there are a few screws short of a full toolbox.
Because my kids were being hurt. With entitlement, they were being hurt. With people's advice, and they didn't have a mother up the front saying, I don't care what the world's opinion is. This is the truth, and this is where I stand. And fortunately, I had a chance. I had them in my home long enough to do it, and I'm not going to lose them. They're seeing truth, they're accepting truth, they're loving truth. And so this is my passion, is to invite you to stand in truth and put your opinions to the side for a minute. Because your kids are the target of distortion.
But basically, the story that prompted this video was on August 30th. Franke's 12-year-old son escaped Hildebrandt's home in Springfield, Utah, and ran to a neighbor's house, knocked on the door, and asked for food and water.
Yeah, well, this is just a shocking story. And for the first time, we're hearing 911 responders and their horrifying descriptions of that child. And the mom of that kid touting herself to millions as being a parent coach that others should emulate.
and my kids are literally starving. I hesitate to say this because it's going to sound like I'm like a mean barbarian.
This morning, a Utah mom influencer arrested, facing 6 felony counts of aggravated child abuse. For the first time, we're hearing emergency responders as they see one of 𝗂𝗏𝗁 children after he allegedly escaped through a window.
The female does have duct tape around each ankle. He's not telling 𝗟P why, and said that there's sores around his wrists and ankles. The 𝗟P is becoming emotional regarding the child's health. I'm going to go ahead and have medical stage on this one.
Arrest documents saying the child escaped to a neighbor's home. The 12-year-old child described by that neighbor in a phone call to police as emaciated and malnourished with open wounds.
He was obviously emaciated and looked like he had duct tape on his wrists and his ankles. And you could obviously see the injuries where he had the impressions in the hands and the skin where that had been wrapped, and he had broken loose, and he was obviously emaciated. The neighbor called 911. The police went and investigated and found another child, probably 𝗍𝗍, in Hildebrandt's home in the same condition, obviously emaciated. That caused them to send police to the Franke home about an hour away, and they found the other 2 children there. So, yeah. All emaciated, being starved to death, obviously getting that tough love. And now both women are being held without bond and could face 15 years in prison. And I hope they get every bit of it. Now, what has the family? So far, Kevin Franke says he wants to keep his children together and continue in fathering them, but I don't think he's exactly innocent in this. I mean, he was part of the whole 8 passengers thing, all the punishments that were going on. I think what happened is Jody broke up their marriage by sequestering Ruby from Kevin, and, then he just, being the coward that he is, fled with their oldest son and basically washed his hands of the other children. Now, Sherry, who's the oldest daughter, was for a long time going down the same path as her mom, would appear with her mom in the many paid advertisements on their channel, and was even starting to blog her freshman year at BYU, but has since come out saying that she realizes now how they all went wrong, and her mother was very abusive, and she's glad her mother was arrested. But for the longest time, she was building up a huge social media following, too. But that is not unusual in this family. If you really break it into, especially Ruby's family, they together, 2 of her sisters, her brother, and her parents, who are now on a Mormon mission to Serbia, I believe, all have YouTube channels ranging from 199,000 subscribers up to close to what she had, over 2 million. So this entire family, particularly her side of the family, are family bloggers that make their living vlogging their daily life. So it was starting to rub off on Sherry, but Sherry has now stepped out. And I will continue to bring you updates on this story. I just thought that this was very, very telling that not all social media is good. We know that. And be very wary of the people you take parenting advice from, because not only did Connections counsel people, they also had a parenting Facebook group that I could not get into that also gave similar advice to parents. So there's no telling how many families these people have damaged. If you take a look at reviews of the work they've done, and this is from JodyHildebrandt.com. This is not her website. This is a website that somebody that was trying to take her down put up. So take it all with a grain of salt. But a lot of these things have been proven to be very, very true. So let's take a look here. This is from Dan, who put this review in just a few months ago. I have grave concerns about the organizations called Connections Classroom and Moms of Truth. That is the parenting Facebook group. My husband and I took the first course and benefit from being reminded not to tell ourselves unhelpful or untrue stories, and to invite one another to listen when we feel we have one another perspective to share. Now that goes back to the old adage that a broken clock is right twice a day. We are grateful for the correct principles, and we were reminded through course material. However, there were some serious red flags we witnessed while taking the course and through subsequent exposure to Connections. Though I recognize there is a need for helpful counseling to heal relationships, destructive division is actually what Connections is perpetuating. The biggest problem I see is that Jody and Ruby do not use the principles they purport to teach. Instead of the golden rule type language of patient and understanding interactions, they often harshly and forcibly shame and batter people, so humiliate and use degrading ways of correcting people when they ask questions or have concerns. In fact, one thing I saw from that Facebook group, a few little clips I was able to get out of it, they were actually berating a person who said that her children come first, and they said, well, that God should come first. And I'm not saying that that's not, proponent in a lot of evangelical type religions, but you still have to have an element of love and nurturing to your parents, to your children. And then, there's lots of little reviews here, and they say they're an actual cult, that they split up many relationships, and that they masquerade as a loving LDS type of counseling when they're exactly the opposite. And so, beware of who you follow. And I will continue to bring you news on this story as it develops, and I will see you soon with another video. Until next time. Hope you had a wonderful Labor Day weekend if you're in Canada or United States. And I just hope you're having a wonderful week in general as fall approaches. It's almost time for Keto-ween. I can't wait. So until next time, 𝗂𝗂𝘀𝗶𝗰. Ow.